Yo, what is going on? What the freak was that? So if you're anywhere near my age, you probably grew up with the Goosebumps books and the TV show's theme song, Haunting Your Dreams. I distinctly remember going to school book fairs, and by the way, what happened to those? Are they still a thing? But that's besides the point. I remember going to the book fairs and seeing a wall of brightly colored, grotesque looking covers, all spouting that iconic Goosebumps logo. You know, this was back in the 90s, so I remember owning a bunch of copies of these Goosebumps books where the covers just seared into my mind. Covers like Welcome to Dead House, Say Cheese or Die, One Day at Horrorland, and of course, Night of the Living Dummy. While these covers are iconic, it's something that I definitely remember from way back in the 90s. It looks like Scholastic is pushing out new covers that are simply just not doing it for me. I could be biased. Actually, I am biased. But I mean, look at this. We have the original Haunted Mask here. And this is the new Haunted Mask. Ain't working for me. You can definitely tell that these new covers are going for more of a silly type of vibe versus the scary and horror aspect of the original ones. Either way, new cover or old cover, rlstine has sold over 400 million copies of these books. So that begs the question, are these books actually scary? Did our parents knowingly buy these books knowing that they would give us nightmares? I mean, on the man's bio on Twitter, it says his job is to terrify kids. So I do remember owning multiple copies of these books, but it's been a hot minute since I've read them. So you know what I did? I bundled up, I locked the doors, and I dove into 3 classic Goosebumps books that I distinctly remember from my past to truly see, are they nightmare fuel or not? And I'm also going to rank each of these books in terms of how scary it is on my very scientific, not really, scale of 0 to 5 bones. 0, not scary at all. 5 being mind-bending extreme horror. So if you're ready, let's dive into it. Alright, so the 3 books that I bought that I definitely remember having back in the day: Welcome to Dead House, Night of the Living Dummy, and The Haunted Mask. Each of these stories were around the 100-page mark, so you can easily get through it through a single sitting or 2, as long as you don't get too scared. So I wanted to start off with Welcome to Dead House, because I think that's actually the very first book that R.L. Stine published in the Goosebumps series. And looking at the original cover here too, it's very ominous, very spooky looking, especially with that glowing orange thing within the house. Whatever that is, it just looks freaking spooky. And then also in the description here at the top of the house, I think it quickly gets to the point of what to expect in the story. It will just kill you. Exactly what my 9 or 10-year-old brain wants to read. So obviously this is a story about a house that is not simply just a house. We start the story off with a family of 4 and their dog heading to a new town in the new house that they got in a city called Dark Falls. The reason? Well, the house was completely free. Free because some long-lost relative of the dad left the house in the dad's name in his will. I mean, who can deny a free big house? And as soon as the family gets to the house, we are immediately met with some spooky stuff going on. Amanda sees a human-like figure up in the 2nd story window. And their dog Petey wants nothing to do with the house either. That dog just starts barking randomly at random things within the house and tries to escape multiple times. From here, the family starts getting settled into the new house, but something is amiss. Amanda feels an eerie feeling like something is watching her throughout the house. She also starts hearing some weird, strange noises like pitter-patters and sees other human figures. And Stine, he keeps you on your feet by adding a ton of atmospheric elements into the story, trying his best to get your little kid mind immersed into the story. Maybe I shouldn't be up here alone, I realized. Maybe the boy in the window was dangerous. Anybody up here? I called, my voice suddenly trembly and weak. Still leaning against the banister, I listened, and I could hear footsteps scampering across the hallway. No, not footsteps. The rain. That's what it was. The patter of the rain against the slate shingled roof. There's a ton of similar scenes just like this, painting that atmospheric feel to you as a reader, so you feel like you're in the story with the main character, Amanda. And I also noticed a trend within these Goosebumps books where Stine likes to place what I like to call jump scare cliffhangers at the end of a lot of chapters. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the door. "Who's in there?" I called. I listened. silence. Then a clap of thunder, closer than the last. I froze as if I was paralyzed, holding my breath. It was so hot up here, hot and damp, and the smell of paint was making me dizzy. I grabbed the doorknob. Anybody in there? I started to turn the knob when the boy crept up from behind and grabbed my shoulder. End of chapter. So a lot of chapters end just like that, with some sort of scare or some sort of cliffhanger, leaving you guessing what actually happened. And the majority of the time, that cliffhanger ends up being something that is not paranormal at all. Ends up being something that's completely normal and easily explainable. Like in this particular example, the thing that grabbed Amanda's shoulder was just her brother. What this does though is get the tension rising and get your heart rate increasing and hook you in on needing to read what is going to happen next. From a kid's perspective, I can totally see this method completely hooking them into reading more and having a really engaging time. So back in the story, Amanda continues to hear and see weird, unexplainable things throughout the house, like actually seeing ghostly people standing directly in front of her. Then one day, their dog Petey bolts out of the house and cannot be found. Amanda and her brother Josh, they venture out looking for Petey, and this is where they find the truth of Dark Falls. The city is actually a town full of the living dead. After a Chernobyl-like incident happened at a nearby chemical plant, causing all the people in the town to basically die. And the house that the family moved into is called Dead House for a reason, because that house is used to entice new families to come to Dark Falls so that family can be killed and sacrificed and be fed to the living dead for them to continue living on in the afterlife. And keep in mind, this is a book geared for kids, but it sounds like a plot that we would see in like The Walking Dead. This book really surprised me with multiple scenes that were very creepy, gruesome, and graphic that paints very immersive imagery in your head. But then, slowly, everything came into focus. And I could see that beneath our hair, we had no faces. Our skin was gone, and only our green skulls were left. Bits of flesh clung to my bony cheeks. There were only deep, black sockets where my eyes had been. The four of us, all dead, sat eating in silence. Our dinner plates, I saw, were filled with small bones. The pounding on the door grew louder and louder, until it was deafening. But I just sat there with my gruesome family, picking up bones from my dinner plate and eating them. I woke up with a start, the horror of the dream still with me. I could still hear the pounding in my ears. I shook my head, trying to chase away the dream. It was morning. I could tell from the blue of the sky outside the window. Oh no, the curtains. They were billowing again, flapping noisily as they blew into the room. I sat up and stared. The window was still closed. And back in the story, the parents of the family wound up being captured by the undead hordes and put on a stage, ready to be killed and sacrificed. Amanda and Josh find a way to get the golden beams of the sun to fall in a torrential flow of rays on the undead crowd, completely annihilating them in a very graphic scene that could easily be in a modern horror film. The cries went up instantly. Horrified cries, agony cries, frantic cries. The cries became howls of pain, of agony. The people in the amphitheater, the living dead caught in the golden light, began scrambling over one another, screeching, pulling, climbing, pushing, trying to claw their way to shade, but it was too late. Their skin began to drop off their bones, and as I stared open-mouthed, they crumbled to powder and dissolved to the ground, their clothes disintegrating along with them. Yeah, that's a kid's book. So yeah, that scene was very graphic, and there's similar scenes throughout the book just like that. And I love it. So this book in particular, I can definitely see being a very scary read for a 4th or 5th grader, or even a 6th grader going into this book. So yeah, Amanda and Josh saved the day, disintegrating the whole crowd of undead there, while the family, with the dog, driving away from Dark Falls. And that is how the story ends.
Come back! Come back! Dark Falls needs you!
Now for my spooky scary scale, I would rate this book 4.5 bones out of 5. It was a very fun, easy to read story that I can easily see kids getting hooked into the story, with great imagery, an engaging plot, and lots of scares and frightening images. Alright, so we're having a pretty good start so far into the Goosebumps universe with Welcome to Dead House. But if you are enjoying the video so far, go ahead and click that like button and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Now, let's move on to book number 2. So, for book number 2, I read Night of the Living Dummy. So for me, the cover alone for this one warrants enough for it to be creepy. Living dummies or dolls of any kind is creepy regardless of what medium it's in. If it's books, if it's a TV show, it's a movie, I don't want it. But that stance is exactly why this book works. So yeah, this cover with Slappy the Dummy on the front cover might be the most iconic character and book cover in the whole franchise. So what is this story all about? Well, you can already tell that this book revolves around dummies and a couple of twin girls named Chris and Lindy. So yeah, one day, Lindy and Chris start exploring their neighborhood and see something in a dumpster. So you know what they find at the bottom of that dumpster.
What are you doing?
I'm not smoking crack.
Don't lie to me.
No, I am smoking crack.
That was easy.
They find a dummy in a gray suit with a big old grin on his face. It's at that moment Lindy decides that she wants to become a professional ventriloquist, naming the dummy Slappy. So these twins, they look alike, they dress alike, they sleep in the same room, and basically share everything. So you know what happens when one sibling has something the other one doesn't, right? Yep, Chris pleads with her parents to please get her a dummy as well, in which they eventually cave in, bringing another dummy into the mix, who actually becomes the star of the show in this story, named Mr. Wood. And then throughout the story, we get more end-of-chapter cliffhangers, just like in Welcome to Dead House, that all end up being things that are not paranormal or really strange, but wind up being something very common and normal. But we do get scenes of creepiness with the dummies being, already creepy alone by themselves. She turned and fluffed up her pillow, propping it higher on the headboard. As she lay back on it, something caught her eye. Someone sitting in the chair in the front of the bedroom window. Someone staring at her. After a sharp intake of breath, she realized it was Slappy. Yellow moonlight poured over him, making his staring eyes glow. He was sitting up in the chair, tilted to the right, at a slight angle, one arm resting on the slender arm of the chair. It was really a bunch of scenes just like this until one day, Chris finds a piece of paper in Mr. Wood's clothing with foreign words on it, and she decides to read them out loud. And in Evil Dead fashion, after those words were spoken, some spooky stuff happens. As Chris starts using Mr. Wood, like a dummy, trying to become a better ventriloquist, Mr. Wood starts spitting out some not very friendly language that everyone thinks that Chris is actually saying. "Your face reminds me of a wart I had removed," Mr. Wood growled at the startled woman. Her mouth dropped in horror. "Chris, if we count your chins, will it tell us your age?" There was laughter floating up from the audience, but it was mixed with gasps of horror. Then we get a little bit on the gross side of things, not really too much horror or scariness. Chris froze in horror, staring as more and more of the disgusting substance poured from her dummy's gaping mouth. A putrid stench, the smell of sour milk, of rotten eggs, of burning rubber, of decayed meat, rose up from the liquid. It puddled over the stage and showered over the front seats. Blinded by the spotlight, Chris couldn't see the audience in front of her, but she could hear the choking and the gagging, the frantic cries for help. "Clear the auditorium! Clear the auditorium!" Miss Burnham was shouting. Chris starts pleading her innocence, that all the vulgar words and the strange antics was not her, but actually Mr. Wood's, but no one believes her at all. And later that day, Mr. Wood speaks directly to Chris and Lindy, telling them that they are now his slaves. So obviously this is concerning, as the dummy is now talking, telling the girls that they are his slaves, but nothing really too scary. But then this next scene did step it up in terms of the creepiness level. Mr. Wood blinked, then hissed at her. An ugly sound, a menacing sound. In the darkness of the stairwell, his painted grin became a threatening leer. In her fright, Chris squeezed the dummy's shoulder, wrapping her fingers around the harsh fabric of the shirt. This is impossible," she whispered. He blinked again. He giggled, his mouth open, making the grin grow wider. He tried to tug out of Chris's grasp, but she hung on without even realizing she was holding him. "But you're a dummy," she squealed. "So are you," he replied. His voice was a deep growl, like the angry snarl of a large dog. So luckily at this point, Mr. Wood isn't too strong, because Lindy and Chris end up trapping him and putting him in a box and actually burying him under a huge mound of dirt. Thinking that everything was going to go back to normal, the next morning, Mr. Wood was back in the house like nothing happened at all. Mr. Wood starts literally choking out the family's dog, where the girls then jumped at Mr. Wood trying to save their dog, Barky. And Mr. Wood ends up out of the tussle, running away from the girls, saying, "I'm free!" But then A steamroller hits and runs over Mr. Wood, smashing him into pieces with a putrid green gas spurting out afterwards. And this was definitely not the end of the story, because when the girls go back up into the room, Stine leaves you with another cliffhanger with our boy Slappy entering the picture. Setting up more Living Dummy books in the future. So overall, I did enjoy the story. It was just not as gruesome or creepy as Welcome to Dead House. There were definitely some elements of creepiness and tension building. So I'm gonna give this book 3.5 bones out of 5. Fun story, iconic character, and plenty of room to grow with the Living Dummy. Alright, so the last book that I read in the Goosebumps series was The Haunted Mask. And this one has another cover that I feel is iconic to the series, and arguably one of the scariest covers in the series. I mean, look at it. You have a goblin-like creature with glowing orange eyes, huge fangs, literally drooling, that's about to be placed on a little kid's face. This one also has a great description of what to expect within the story if looks could kill. So this story takes place right around Halloween, which is perfect timing since our Halloween is coming up here pretty soon. We're introduced to our main character, Carly Beth, who I would say is basically bullied the whole first quarter of the book.
Somebody or something.
Multiple people bully her, but mainly it's two boys who are constantly tormenting her, trying to make her scream, which they successfully do almost every single time. I was getting strong vibes of this story going down the route of Carrie. But thankfully, we went down somewhat of a different direction, with our main character getting back at the boys who are tormenting her, by finally scaring them on Halloween with a scary costume. I mean, in one scene, the boys put an actual live worm in her sandwich, with her unknowingly taking a bite of it. I mean, that's just gross.
What's wrong, Carly Beth? Oh, it's the worm!
So I totally understand if she were to go full-on Carrie mode right now. So Carly Beth, she sets off to go find a costume that is scary enough to scare the boys, so she doesn't have to wear a costume that her mom made, which was a big old yellow duck costume. Then we get some more classic Stine end of chapter cliffhangers, where Carly Beth screams at something, but it almost ends up never being paranormal, with the bullies pulling some sort of prank on her, or it's just going to be her brother. Then at a local store, she ends up finding a mask that is perfect in the back room of a store that she's obviously not supposed to be in. And in that room, she finds exactly what she's been looking for. Carly Beth took a deep breath and stepped up to the shelves. Her eyes settled on an ugly mask on the lower shelf. It had a bulging bald head. Its skin was putrid yellow-green. Its enormous sunken eyes were an eerie orange that seemed to glow. It had a broad, flat nose smashed in like a skeleton's nose. The dark-lipped mouth gaped wide, revealing jagged animal fangs. Staring hard at the hideous mask, Carly Beth reached out a hand toward it. Reluctantly, she touched the broad forehead, and as she touched it, the mask cried out. Then the store owner finds Carly Beth in the back room and tells her that these masks back here are not for sale because they are too scary.
They're too frightening.
Carly Beth pleads and pleads to buy the mask, with the store owner eventually caving in, all for a mere $30. So once she's back home, she decides to test out the mask and see how scary it is by pranking her brother, which works wonderfully, scaring the crap out of him.
No! Who are you?
Or then she also finds out that the mask alters her voice
to be deep and menacing.
Also, the mask starts changing the way she thinks, making her to become more wild, abrasive, and ready to cause chaos. Similar to how the One Ring affects anyone who holds it for a period of time, like, Gollum. This mask does something similar, but very quickly. I'll chew her to bits. I'll tear her skin off her bones. Furious thoughts raged through Carly Beth's mind. She tensed her muscles, crouched low, and prepared to pounce. But before she could make her move, the two boys pulled their mother away. Let's go, Mom. Yeah, let's go. She's crazy. Yeah, I'm crazy. 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 The word repeated, roaring through Carly Beth's mind. The mask grew hotter. tighter. So you can definitely tell that the mask is having some strange effect on her for sure, but she does end up finally getting revenge on those two boys, scaring them completely and threatening to put their heads on a spike. The boys end up dropping their candy, screaming, running away. Then finally, Carly Beth comes to her senses and tries to take the mask off, but something is not working. She finds out that the mask is just not coming off her head. There's no gap at the bottom of the mask to put her finger under, realizing the mask is now her face. As anyone would in the situation, she starts freaking out, ends up heading back to the store where she bought the mask, hoping the owner would know of a way to get the mask off. To which he does. The store owner, he was expecting her to come back, knowing the mask was going to cause issues, and he ends up telling her that the only way to get this mask off is using a symbol of love.
Love, Mary. Love.
And it's at this point all the other evil masks in the shop come to life, floating up, chasing her in hopes to consume her and eat her. What was that sound? That deep gurgling sound, that low murmur that seemed to be following her. Oh no, Carly Beth cried out as she glanced back, and she saw the gruesome heads flying towards her. A ghoulish parade. They flew in a single file. One long chain of throbbing, jabbering heads. Their eyes glowed brightly, as bright as car headlights, and they were all trained on Carly Beth. So she ends up running away out of the store, trying to find a symbol of love as the floating heads are chasing her, and using a gift from her mom as a symbol of love, she's able to take the mask off just in time before the other floating heads consume her, banishing away the hordes of masks.
No, no! This is Carly Beth. I am Carly Beth. This is me.
And that's the end of the story, but in rlstine fashion, we have our character overcome a challenge, but then we are hit with another cliffhanger at the very end of the story, setting up more potential books in the future. So there were a ton of great elements within this book that did not feel too kiddish. And we had themes of revenge, bullying, our hero becoming the villain, desperation, and the power of love. With all these themes and that feeling of claustrophobia, I give this book 4 bones out of 5. And there we have it, 3 Goosebumps books ranked on a very scientific scale of bones. Overall though, I think these books pack a punch in terms of overall horror themes for any kid reading, while also reading fun and engaging stories. So, are they nightmare fuel? Well, I'll find out tonight. So let me know down below which Goosebumps book scared you in the past or recently. And for sticking around this long, you've earned 1 XP token, and if you're already a subscriber, you get an extra XP token, so here you go. Have a good one. Peace.